What's up, Dodger fans? Welcome to a special New Year's Eve edition of Talkin Blue, the podcast that refuses to take a day off, even when the calendar is basically begging us to. I'm Cody Snavely, joined by my co-host Vince Samperio, and today we're talking all things 2025 Dodgers baseballs, from the moves, the rumors, the surprises, and whatever bold resolutions that our front office has that they hopefully will keep. But before we get into all that and more and go over all the latest trades, moves with the rosters, just want to plug in our website, DodgersBeat.com, your go-to spot for breaking news, analysis, updates. If you want to stay locked in on everything happening in Dodger Blue, hit up DodgersBeat.com. So, Vince, it's been a while since you and I have joined together on here. The holiday season is come and gone. We are in the final, days of the 2025 year. But before we get into everything that we're going to talk about, how have you been the last week?
Hey, not too bad. Got the holidays, had a nice Christmas, getting ready. I don't really do much New Year's, but getting ready for the new year. And yeah, I don't think much has changed on our end from when we last talked, other than Kike Claus being in a commercial wearing Dodger blue. So maybe that's a sign of things come.
Yeah, the Kike Hernandez, it seems like they have the most, obvious handshake agreement to kind of bring that reunion back. But yeah, honestly, for me, the holidays was pretty hectic the past couple weeks. I mentioned on social media, and then even like I believe on our last episode here, I started getting the flu, had to deal with that, ended up having the whole family get that. But thankfully, we were healthy enough for Christmas morning. New Year's, funny enough, I can't tell you the last time I stayed up to 12 and celebrated it. I'm kind of an old head over here. I go to bed, like 9:30, 10 most nights, because I'm up, right in the morning at 5 in the morning. So it's just not something I do, but we'll see maybe if I get there. Stranger Things is coming out that night. So I'm sure a lot of people are going to be watching that. So, but other than that, the Dodgers, they end the year on back-to-back seasons on the high note. They're World Series champions, the first time in franchise history that they've done that. But, they've kind of had to do a little bit of a roster crunch over the last couple weeks. Unlike most teams, their 40-man roster is pretty much, at maximum capacity. It ended up reaching 40 players after they announced the official signing of Edwin Diaz. Dodgers did make a trade yesterday that was officially announced, I believe, by the Marlins first late last night. But Esteury Ruiz is actually being shipped to Miami, and the Dodgers are getting a 19-year-old Cuban prospect by the name of, I believe it is Adriano Marrero. Thoughts on the trade? Do you like it, hate it? It seems like something that the Dodgers probably were trying to do to try to free up some roster space before the new year begins. Not sure if it's a tell of what they're going to do in 2026, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on it.
Yeah, anytime the Dodgers make a trade to clear a 40-man spot, you're thinking, you know what's coming. But I think, honestly, generally, they just need to kind of clear some 40-man spots. I mean, Esteury Ruiz, as enticing and tempting as it is to, maybe say, hey, one more year in the Dodger system, maybe he figures something out. He might be one of those guys who is what he is at this point. I mean, the Dodgers, made it known kind of what they thought of him because Justin Dean was over him, was on the roster over him, and even though Justin Dean was better known, or at least to us, was told that he was good defensively. He didn't always look the smoothest out there in center field. And Ruiz is probably just as fast, if not faster, on the base paths, and had at least a chance to hit a home run if he ran into one. So whatever it is, that was who he was. He was a guy that was on the roster for when they need him, a guy to fill in and play for OKC and AAA. And for the Dodgers, it's a lottery ticket. A guy that is young, 18, that there's some tweets out there from some guys that are scouts or try to be scouts that like him. I'm not going to promise. I'm not going to sit here and say that I know anything about him other than what I've read from those tweets. And from what I've read from those tweets, it's a lottery ticket, and I'll take it. If he ends up being the 2030 World Series MVP, then so be it.
Yeah, I think from the Dodgers side of the trade, it's very simple, like you said. They're really just trying to clear whatever 40-man roster space that they can. Ruiz, you look at his baseball profile, you look at his minor league stats, he's actually been really, really good in the minor leagues for the Dodgers with AAA OKC. He had a 925 OPS. He was one of only two players that batted like over 300 with the Dodgers minor league system last year. The other one was Ryan Ward. Those two guys were like the Bash brothers in AAA, which is funny enough, but he kind of hasn't really translated to the major league level. Even when he had his stint with the then Oakland A's and he led the American League in stolen bases with, I think, 67 in 2023, I think it was. He never really hit for well, he never really hit for power. He kind of was an on base guy. And then, he could have the ability to get, on second or third just by stealing it. So, and the defense was fine, probably a little bit at league average or a little bit above league average, but the speed definitely helps. But kind of his spot on the Dodgers roster kind of just seemed a little bit wasted. Didn't seem like he was really helping the Dodgers out much other than, just taking up a spot on the 40-man roster. Didn't really get much playing time with LA either. He got called up a couple times. I believe like one of them was when Max Muncy went back to on the IL in the second half of the season. So clearly the Dodgers, it seems like they didn't really value him as much as other teams were. But if you're the Miami Marlins and you're looking for some sort of offense, I guess this is a fun toolsy guy to acquire. And if you're the Dodgers as well, it just goes to show Andrew Freeman likes to get, kind of maximizes the value of every player on the roster because, 19-year-old Cuban pitching prospect, we won't know much until probably another, 3 or 4 years, whether he's going to amount to anything. But Baseball America had him ranked as the top 20 of the international pitching prospects last year. So clearly there is some merit to the name, and he hasn't made his debut stateside, Adriano, but we'll see what happens. And once with the Dodgers get a hold of them, they've had a really good pitching lab, besides the injuries over the last several years. So I'm interested to see what the Dodgers do. And I'm interested to see who else is on the chopping block. Like, do they kind of try to maximize Ryan Ward's value right now? Like, do they really expect him to be on the opening day roster for the Dodgers? Or, do they try to trade him while, his value is pretty high right now? So we'll see what else the Dodgers, have to make, especially if they're going to, be active in free agency or the trade market for somebody else. So I don't think the Dodgers are done. I do think this is telling of, what they're trying to do with roster flexibility, as they say.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen them do this a few times with a few different guys now. Matt Beatty turned into River Ryan. Even Dustin May, who was a little bit better than these guys, but was not going to be in the Dodgers rotation. They get a former first round pick for him that, a lot of people are seemingly liking in the Dodger system. So, yeah, you never know what it's going to turn into. And, yeah, like you said, maximizing the 40-man roster in terms of during the season to get that depth and, to use kind of all 40 spots as they need, but also to, unload them when they need to and try to get some back for them as well.
Yeah, and the other added ripple to all this is, the Dodgers have to clear as many spots as pretty much for any move they make. They're going to end up clearing like a good amount of spots on the 40-man roster when the 60-day IL opens, which is in like mid-February once teams report to spring training. I think the first team that announced it already was the Orioles at February 11th. It's probably around when the Dodgers are going to report to the Cactus League as well. So that's kind of the date you want to kind of pinpoint there to say, well, maybe that's when they're going to re-sign Kike Hernandez and Evan Phillips. Maybe that's when they're going to start transferring, maybe some of these other rehab guys that are going back from their Tommy John, like Gavin Stone with his shoulder injury. May take a little bit longer for him to complete his rehab. So Dodgers have time to kind of get to work, but in terms of the immediate effect right now for the roster, they needed to clear at least one spot if they're going to make one move. Obviously, as Carlos Garcia put in the chat, both Kyle Tucker, Bo Bichette, those are the two biggest names out there on the free agent market in terms of the position players. We'll see what the Dodgers do to play around with that, but couple other free agency news that are somewhat involving the Dodgers is, Kirby Yates. Today it was reported that he signed a 1-year deal with the LA Angels. So he's going to stay in Southern California. He's going to re-up with pitching coach, the brother, family member,
Mike
it's
Maddox.
Mike Maddox, who was actually the pitching coach in the Texas Rangers
Yeah.
organization when Yates had his career year in 2024. So maybe he's looking to kind of rekindle some of that magic. Thoughts on the deal, him going to the Angels, him leaving the Dodgers? Did you really expect the Dodgers to even entice re-signing him at all, especially, after they, re-up with Edwin Diaz?
Yeah, probably not. Just based on the roster and roster flexibility, he wouldn't have an option. He didn't pitch very well for whatever reason here. But I thought he might have just gone out on a high with the Kirby tattoo on his backside and head into the suns right into the sunset. But I guess maybe the Angels are gonna start becoming like kind of that place where I still get to live in Southern California. And Kelly Johnson did it. He now he's with the Tigers. Maybe Kirby Yates can do a rebuild, a little value on a team that maybe not so good. He's going to get some opportunities to maybe close out some games or at least be in the back end of that bullpen and either get traded at the deadline or find his way on another team the year after.
Yeah, I'm not surprised that the Dodgers aren't bringing back, Yates. You look at his season, he battled some injuries. The hamstring issue ended up being something more pressing that affected him down the stretch, and he ended up not appearing in a single postseason game for the Dodgers, only doing some live batting practice with the team throughout October. So kind of was an afterthought. It's very funny. You look back at it to last winter when they signed Tanner Scott and Kirby Yates. You were talking about probably the two best, bullpen arms on the market, ended up going to the Dodgers. Both those guys kind of were irrelevant in the postseason run. But, it was a 1-year deal for Yates, veteran reliever. He's had Tommy John surgery twice in his career already. So, to expect the season that he had in 2024 with the Dodgers this past year, I just feel like was unrealistic, but we didn't expect it to be as bad as it was. ERA almost near 5, struggle with the home run, struggle with the command, and obviously at the end of the day, struggled just staying on the field. I thought, like you said, he may have just retired and gone out into the sunset as a world champion. I believe he's entering his age 38 season, would be his 12th season in the show. So he's a veteran guy. I'm not sure what the Angels are looking to do with him over there. But I will give them credit. The Angels have been in the news lately. They settled on their court case the other day with the Skaggs, all that stuff, all that drama. Mike Maddox, who we mentioned, terrific pitching coach, like awesome. I kind of like their coaching staff. I know Kurt Suzuki on a 1-year deal is a little weird for a first-year manager, but it seems like him and GM Perry Managian, they're like together on this for this 2026 year. And they've made some good marginal moves. I like Grayson Rodriguez trying to take a chance on him as well. So I'll give credit to our freeway rival, the Angels here in this situation. And who knows, maybe they will, like I said, rekindle some of that magic that, Yates had in 2024. And then they can get, like you said, trade him at the deadline, get some additional picks. For the Dodgers side of all of this, though, there was just absolutely no spot for Yates to return. We've already talked about the surplus of starters that are on this team. A lot of those guys may have to transition to the bullpen. What is Gavin Stone? Is he going to be built up to be a starter? River Ryan, say they bring back Evan Phillips and you have him in the second half of the season. And you already have a lot of veteran guys. Blake Trinan, he's still on the team. Don't forget about him. He's got 1 year remaining. Hopefully he can rebound. Tanner Scott's the big one that everyone's hoping to rebound. And then obviously you got Edwin Diaz, who's your full-time closer now. So there's really not many late inning options the Dodgers needed, especially to sign, at a major league, deal. We got a lot of guys that are making like minor league money, $750,000, all that stuff. So I think the Dodgers and Andrew Freeman, as much money as they are willing to spend, they would like to save a couple dollars here and there.
Yeah, makes sense.
Other than that, really not much has been happening on the free agent market for any team, especially the Dodgers. Their two biggest moves and their two only moves, re-signing Miguel Rojas, signing Edwin Diaz. They have been kind of around in the news lately with a lot of two other guys that are actually off the free agent market now. The first one we'll talk about, fan favorite, friend of the show, Joe Kelly. He announced kind of his retirement. He didn't want to use the word or the phrase retirement, but he did say that his playing career is over. Kind of a controversial name, I guess, around, Dodger Blue. He's had some high moments, some fan favorite moments. You look back to that 2020 season, him against Carlos Correa and, the sad face, all that stuff and that drama. But then the overall numbers, you look at it, they were kind of okay in his time in a Dodgers uniform. But a lot of fans love him for a lot of his antics on and off the field. First thoughts on Joe Kelly kind of calling it a career now?
Yeah, I mean, up until they got through the regular season, I thought we might still see Joe Kelly at a point last year, just because he said he was kind of sticking around, and maybe the kind of hinted at the Dodgers being one of the only teams he'd really be interested in. the Dodgers did kind of need some bullpen help there. Calling Joe Kelly bullpen help is subjective sometimes because he can help a bullpen, but he also can not help a bullpen. So, but shout out to him. He like I said, he started out, breaking Hanley Ramirez's ribs, and Dodger fans hated him, and then he was on, that Boston team that took him out in 2018, and then he redeemed himself. He's Mariachi Joe now, and I'm sure we'll see him every season or every other season at Dodger Stadium throwing out a first pitch or doing something like that.
Yeah, I do remember the rumor mill late in 2024 or 2025 where they were saying, we had a lot of injuries. We kind of needed arms. Joe Kelly ended up throwing for several teams. One of them was the Dodgers, and he kind of made it known publicly to everybody, the only way I'm coming back to pitch is with the Dodgers. If I was a player too, especially entering late in the season, I'd be like, yeah, I would sign with the Dodgers. They're on their way to a World Series run here, and they ended up doing that without him. So I do like Joe Kelly. I liked, I kind of like the demeanor that, how he played, and not every time sometimes it would backfire against the team, especially against Carlos Correa, who they've had multiple matchups against. And, he's gotten Correa out on a few occasions, and Correa's ended up burning him a few times as well. I remember one of the home runs was at Dodger Stadium a couple seasons ago. I liked it when they traded back for him in 2023. The Dodgers needed help in the bullpen, and he ended up being serviceable. But, 2024 was kind of, the injury plagued, season for Joe Kelly. Didn't really make an impact for the team down the stretch. Made more of an impact with his comments about the Yankees and all that, fueling the rivalry from when his time in the Boston Red Sox organization. But yeah, we wish the best to him. Like I said, friend of the show, we've had him on a couple of times. So awesome guy, great guy, and then Rob Bradford, who did the interview for Baseball Isn't Boring. He's also another friend of the show. So if anyone hasn't checked that interview out, it's a great listen. And if you need any more updates, we do have that on the website as well. The other news is a little bit less, it is Dodgers related because he was just on the team and he had an impact during the 2022 season. Andrew Heaney, Dodgers ended up, signing him after he was released by the Pittsburgh Pirates. He ended up calling it a career over the holiday weekend as well. Quick thoughts on Andrew Heaney. I feel like he was one of the unsung heroes in that 2020 season where they won 111 games, had a really good career year with the Dodgers. When he was healthy, ended up pitching some postseason innings that weren't too shabby either. Andrew Heaney calling it a career. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, another one. Congrats to him. The fact that he mentioned the 10 years in his goodbye post on Instagram probably means like, maybe he not question how much he loved the game, but maybe it's like one of those. I got to 10 years. I'm good now. He'll get another ring. He won a ring being active on the 2023 Rangers. He'll get a ring this year. Pitch for the Dodgers. So, it was fun to kind of watch him. That's when the Dodger Lab, I think, was maybe not at his peak, but it was cooking. We had Heaney, we had Tyler Anderson. Like there was a string of guys kind of coming to the team, being good with the Dodgers for a year, and then finding themselves some money on the way out. Kind of ended with Noah Syndergaard, but he didn't find that success anywhere else, so maybe it wasn't the Dodgers.
Yeah, Andrew Heaney's funny just because the Dodgers have always had some general interest in him. Not many people will remember, but he was actually acquired by the Dodgers in a trade, I believe, with the Marlins back in 2015, that offseason. And then he ended up getting shipped straight to the Angels, which was the last trade between the Angels and the Dodgers for Howie Kendrick. And, a couple of years later, he ends up back on the Dodgers organization, this time actually throwing a pitch for them in 2022. I remember leading up to that, there was always that notion, around, people saying, the Dodgers and Andrew Heaney kind of feel like a match made in heaven in terms of, him entering the pitching lab. And this is when the Dodgers, were famous for, their reclamation projects, bringing in guys and then making them better. Noah Syndergaard, even though that didn't work out, he pretty much made it known that that's kind of the well-known thought around players throughout the league. Ended up actually working really well for him in 2022, had a really good year. I believe he had a sub-4 ERA, ended up starting or pitching bulk relief in the postseason against the Padres. They ended up losing, obviously, that series regardless, but awesome career for him. He reached the 10-year service, so that's a huge milestone for players. Gets a World Series ring with the Rangers. gets another one with the Dodgers because he was on the team for a couple weeks there. And then I feel like he signed with the Dodgers because I think I read that he lived in Oklahoma City, so him pitching with the AAA team ended up working out perfectly for him and his family. So wish him the best of luck as well. But other than that, there's really not much else that's going on in the rumor mill. It's kind of driving me insane with the way baseball, their off season works. Not many moves. We got a couple during the winter meetings, but then after that, pretty much fell apart. We got guys in the chat right now, asking, do we expect any of these guys to sign anytime soon? I mean, what's your projected, when we see some more of these big dominoes fall? Are we talking about like right after New Year's, or are we pushing closer to February?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we have two coming with the two guys from Japan, but even both of them, like Murakami didn't get what maybe some people thought he might get. It doesn't seem like Amai is going to get what some people think he might get. Okamoto might end up getting the best deal out of all of them, and that's just because he had lower ceiling, but maybe a little bit of a higher floor, and just brings a different value than Amai or Murakami do. But yeah, after that, I don't know. Like it's always one of those one lever kind of breaks something free, and whether that's Tucker or Bregman or Bo Bichette or a trade, like whatever it is, it just seems we're all kind of contingent and waiting on that. I'm hoping that the first half of January we get at least some of these guys signed. I mean, 7 of the 10 top free agents from the Athletics are still unsigned, I believe, and let's cut that down to 3 in the first 2 weeks of January, and get this going because like baseball is going to have a lot of momentum. You don't want to have the World Baseball Classic going and some guys still not signed. I don't think it'll get that far, but you kind of want all positive momentum leading into the World Baseball Classic.
Yeah, I'm hoping in after the holidays, the new year starts, over the first 2 weeks of January, you start getting the big guys to start falling and picking their teams. Guys like the Dodgers in their front office, Andrew Friedman already made it known he wants to get all his work done in the offseason compared to the trade deadline. So I imagine the Dodgers' big moves will probably be wrapped up by the end of January. And then the marginal moves, like possibly re signing, Kike Hernandez and other guys that are going to go straight to the 60-day IL, will happen right when the team reports to camp in February. And then you mentioned it, the WBC is coming up. I imagine a lot of these players want to have an idea of where they're going to be playing, especially if they're competing in the WBC and they're going to be on those rosters. So just for their sake and having the flexibility and getting ready for not only that, but also the 2026 regular season, they're going to want to get that done right away. So it'll be interesting to see how some of these top free agents markets develop. I feel like I made it known on social media. I feel like the longer Kyle Tucker remains on the free agent market, the more that bodes well for the Dodgers, because I just feel like he would be open to that short-term high AAV dollar, contract that Andrew Friedman famously will like to offer some key free agents, but only time will tell with that. But obviously, cliche here, New Year's is coming up. New Year's Eve is tomorrow. And then, we got Thursday, New Year's Day, 2026. Here we are. New Year's resolutions. Everybody has them. We have them. Your friend has them. Your wife, your brother, your sister. Everyone makes some type of statement or pact or a quest that you want to complete by the end of the 2026 year. Same could be said for the Dodgers here. I had a couple. I'm working on an article that I'm looking to post tomorrow on the website of kind of New Year's resolutions for the Dodgers. I'm interested if there's any goals that you have for the Dodgers specifically, whether it's the offense, bullpen, defense, starting pitching, just winning the World Series in general. I'm interested to pick your brain on this one.
Yeah, this one's interesting because coming out back to back, what more could you ask for? And obviously you can get greedy and ask for a lot more things. But my first one is Dodgers organization, but not necessarily Dodgers on the field. Uh, I'm gonna need the marketing team for the Dodgers to really ramp up and step up to give away promotions this year. And bobbleheads are I've talked about this before on other podcasts. Like bobbleheads are fun. The Dodgers I think overdo it a little bit, but there's a lot to overdo this year, whether it's bobblehead or some other kind of form of something. With all the different moments in the postseason, with all the guys on the team now, with even the new guy Edwin Diaz has his own little shtick with the trumpet, like that. Let's see a little creativity on the Dodgers marketing side of you're already going to get 40 plus thousand people every game guaranteed. Bobblehead games other than Otani aren't quite the crazy draw like they used to be. So let's give something a little bit different and maybe or make them a little bit more fun and try to build up and really make something like cool because that reminded me because I recently got this back wall right here, started throwing up some bobbleheads, and then I had like so many bobbleheads from the last few years, and some of them were just like, this is just a generic standard pose that I really don't have use for. This guy played for the Dodgers between 1 and 3 years, and it's if it would have been a cool something, then at least it would have been represented like got a Justin Turner Christmas one back there from the Quakes, so something like that.
Yeah, I think I'll give the Dodgers credit on this front. Out of every team here on the East Coast, the Dodgers blow them away in the bobblehead market. I feel like, a team that's really close to me is the Phillies. I'm like 30 minutes away from Citizens Bank Park. They do like 2 bobblehead giveaways a year. It's pretty bad. So if you're like a bobblehead, collector and you're looking to get through that, you're not really going to get too many per season in Philly or Baltimore. They don't really do them a lot. Where the Dodgers, on the other hand, have it like at least 15 that I could see that they've already announced or that they're planning to do. So that's kind of an annual thing. But you look at this postseason run, man, they got a lot of poses. They got a lot of different
Just Game
things that they
Seven
can.
has about 3 or 4,
Yeah,
and that
they
doesn't
they
even count all
have
the other ones.
they have a lot to choose from. You got to also imagine the Dodgers going to a baseball game for as much as it is now, not even just talking about, the economy, the state of the world. Going to Dodger Stadium is expensive regardless of, how much money you make or what you're earning. It is more than just a baseball game. Um, the aspect of them appealing to a wider audience has brought in a lot more traffic. Like you said, probably 40,000 Dodger fans guaranteed almost each and every night. They broke an attendance record last year. I imagine after winning back-to-back championships, they're probably going to break their own record yet again this upcoming season. So got to get creative, whether it's the promotions, the in-stadium stuff, getting more people to come into the door and be willing to pay the expensive prices because parking's up, tickets are up. That's the price the fans pay for the team making the postseason 13 straight years. And someone's got to pay off that $700 million contract that Otani's got. I took my New Year's resolution a little bit more on the player side and everything. The biggest issue the Dodgers had last season wasn't a secret. It was the bullpen. Surprisingly, like I said, after signing, Tanner Scott, Kirby Yates, and then having the dogs from 2024 return, their bullpen was pretty subpar last year. The only thing that they did well was ranking in the top 5 in F4, and that's just surely based off the amount of innings they pitched. So they were valuable on that front. But 17th in FIP, 21st in ERA, 29 or 20th in walks per 9, 15th in home runs per 9, and then first in innings pitched. And the big one, surprisingly, they did blow a lot of saves, but they only ranked 10th. So they had 25 blown saves last year. You take away even half those blown saves, and they had the best record in the National League, possibly in Major League Baseball as well. So I think you just got to find some type of consistency with the bullpen again. I was very going back and forth between would I rather have a consistent bullpen or would I rather have a healthy starting rotation? Because I think both go hand in hand. We saw in the second half of the season, especially from August until October, you got your starters with that rotation cooking, going 6, 7, 8+ innings each and every start. You don't really need to worry about your bullpen. And then you add in the fact of who they added this year, Edwin Diaz, you're kind of working backwards a little bit as well. So you're saying, all right, well, who's going to pitch the 7th and 8th inning for us this year, if those guys can go deep into games? They did have some bright spots in 2025. Jack Dreyer finished top like 15 in Rookie of the Year voting, had a really good season from throwing from the left-handed side. Ben Kasparius was a very interesting arm. I just feel like they tried to have him do too much. I want him to have a clean role for the bullpen this upcoming season, and then hopefully he can rebound from his bad second half. And then the big one is Tanner Scott. If he can start clicking as the Dodgers' new setup man, which is a role I've explained I think he's going to excel at a little bit better than just being the straight up closer. You're talking about probably the filthiest, 8th and 9th inning combo. I couldn't imagine, Tanner Scott and Edwin Diaz being on the same bullpen, 2 or 3 years ago. Now they are, and it's on the Dodgers. We'll see what happens this upcoming year, but I feel like if they can correct the bullpen, I like the offense on paper right now, even if they didn't make another move for the rest of the offseason. The starting rotation's pretty much set. They got arms also, waiting for their opportunity to shine as well. But the bullpen is the big one that I think the Dodgers definitely just need to course correct here.
Yeah, I mean, bullpen's always going to be scary. You think back to, you know, a lot of these teams that could have used a better bullpen in the last 13 years, and maybe the Dodgers would have a couple more titles up there. And, for me, it comes down to the offense too. And, as trusting as I am in the offense, the Dodgers were kind of frustrating, even throughout the postseason. Like, it never felt like they truly clicked. The first two games against the Reds, they put up some runs, but then after that, it was more well timed hits, or at least timed hits. I think well timed could have been the 12th inning instead of the 18th inning in that long game. But uh, for me, I think a New Year's resolution is for the Dodgers, and this will contradict how I felt at other times, but I think this time that's how I feel, is to kind of trust some of the young guys. Like, they let Andy Pages kind of have free reign out there, and it worked out relatively well for them. He didn't hit in the postseason, but he had one of the biggest plays of the postseason. And I think with the young outfielders, I mean, you see a lot of guys starting to come up now, 22, 21, and being good or being really good, or at least, figuring it out. And I think, the Dodgers kind of have that in some of these young outfielders. I think Mike Schroeder is probably the one that's closest because he was a college guy that is a little bit older. And, we heard the chatter for Ryan Ward last year. And, while Ryan Ward might not be that guy, I remember when Zach Rex and DJ Peters were getting at bats and getting at least an attempt to kind of maybe crack this roster and see what they can do. And I think if you're not going to go out and sign a Kyle Tucker, or you're not going to go out and sign a Bo Bichette, then I think, trust in some of these young guys and kind of see if you catch flash in the pan or really good or figure it out, or at the very least you'll know. And then, maybe you go into a deadline where you do kind of need a trade for someone. That's the one drawback to it. But I think the Dodgers can, I want to see a like string of position players again that the Dodgers have, where it kind of feels not homegrown, but just like, oh yeah, I remember when the Dodgers drafted him, or when the Dodgers signed him, or when the Dodgers traded for him, and now he's contributing to a World Series team.
Well, and this kind of even goes to like my New Year's resolution for the fan base. Obviously, it's easy to get caught up in the moment, especially how you looked at the Dodgers, play this season. Only like 93 wins. They didn't really coast to a division title. They ended up, having to play a wild card round. I think at the end of the day, you just got to trust everybody running the team, from Dave Roberts to the players. Load management is a thing, especially now. Back-to-back years, they won the World Series. They started in international waters, came over to the U.S., ended up playing in the longest stretch of a season in Major League Baseball history this past year, starting in Tokyo, Japan, finishing in Canada all the way in November 1st. So there's going to be opportunities where the Dodgers can rest some of these guys. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if there's not a single starter that even gets close to 30 starts. You could see them rest Yamamoto. Tyler Glasnow is probably due for an IL stint here or there. Blake Snell similarly as well. That's where what you mentioned, bringing it in, whether it's the position players or the pitchers. Another guy I want to see get the opportunity to shine that a lot of people are high on, River Ryan. River Ryan looks awesome. He looked really good in his short stint in 2024. We'll see what this kid has going for him. But the Dodgers, I feel like you look at the division around them, the National League for the most part, besides, 2 or 3 teams really giving them a threat for, kicking them off or so. I still think it's the Phillies. That's the only team that really sticks out to me here at this point in the offseason. That could change, but I think the Dodgers' worst enemy is themselves. Just play the season, like Kike Hernandez said. It can be a long 162, but once they get into October, I think this team I trust to kind of lock in and get everything ready. Looking in the comments, though, real quick, your old compadre Jeff Snyder said you don't like bobbleheads. You told him that.
Yeah, well, it's on right. You can go back and find it. I'd say the Dodgers do too many at that time, and they're very generic, which is what I just said right now. So,
Yeah, but
but yeah,
going back to the October thing, I trust this team to kick it on. Once they get there, I think the benchmark is to just win the division. That's usually around 90 wins. I mean, hell, even just making the postseason, even if all else goes, awry for the Dodgers, we just saw like an 84 win team make the postseason in the Reds. So that's kind of what the Dodgers should aim for. Obviously, we want to see them win 95 plus, maybe 100 plus games, and that could realistically happen. But, we just want this team to win 11, 13 games in October with whatever position they're in seeding wise. But other than that, there's really not much else to catch up on here as we enter the new year. We will probably be back in about a week or so. Once everything's here, hopefully we get some breaking news. But anything else you want to do to close us out here, Vince?
no, I mean, usually on these types of shows, you thank everyone for all their support over the year, but for us specifically, Talking Blue here, it's been 3 episodes, but hey, so love the support there, and as the Dodgers continue to grow into a behemoth, Talking Blue will hopefully continue to grow into some here for Dodger fans, and we appreciate you.
Yeah, everything here with the channel, the website, DodgersBeat.com, Bleed Lows Podcast Network, the Bleed Lows Podcast, and then Talkin Blue. Big year for us in 2025 with the channel. Reached a few milestones, got to cover a lot more games, and in the postseason as well, providing all of you guys with that coverage. So we definitely appreciate all the support over the past couple years, especially this season. So we're on to 2026, believe it or not, and the Dodgers are going to get ready to go on that three-peat run. But we still got much of the offseason left, all of January, all of February. So hopefully we have a couple more, breaking news live stream episodes coming up soon. But other than that, that'll do it for this episode of Talkin Blue. We will be with you hopefully next week at some time. So be sure to follow us on social media. Follow Vince and I. We got our handles right below here on the channel as well. So we will see you next time. Have a good one, guys.